You weren't meant to be here, not in this building, not on this floor, and definitely not with a keycard that still works after 10 p.m. But here you are, pushing a cart full of cleaning supplies across carpet that costs more per square foot than your paycheck could justify. It's always quiet at this hour. The kind of corporate silence that settles in after the last Zoom call ends and the last executive Uber eats their dinner. You like it this way. No fake smiles, no forced banter, no one asking if you saw the company memo you weren't even on the list to receive. Just silence. And in that silence, you see everything they don't. You're not listed in the org chart. You're not invited to strategy offsites. You don't have a Slack login. But you have something more valuable. Keys. Keys that open doors, offices, server rooms, break rooms. Access that no one notices until something spills. And while they're performing during the day, you're observing at night. You notice what's taped to monitors, what's scribbled on post-it notes, what's half-shredded in trash bins labeled confidential. You hear things, snippets of conversation, passive-aggressive voicemails, execs mumbling about burn rates while washing their hands. And slowly, you start to see a pattern. Not a dramatic one. A quiet, consistent one. Something's wrong here. Not obviously wrong. No red ink all over the walls, but structurally wrong. You live frugally. A studio apartment you can barely afford. Rents $1,275. An 11-year-old Nissan that starts 4 out of 5 days. Your fridge holds eggs, oat milk, rice, a jar of salsa, and pre-shredded cheese. You budget tightly. Not because it's noble, but because it's non-negotiable. And yet, somehow, you hear salaried employees, people earning 3 times your income, complaining about being broke 2 days after payday. You watch a supervisor walk into a payday loan place on his lunch break. You know the look of someone calculating how much gas they can afford versus how far they can push their minimum payment. But what eats at you isn't their struggle, it's the hypocrisy. Because the money is here. Everywhere. You mop around it. You vacuum beneath it. You've seen the dashboards left open, the vendor invoices crumpled in wastebaskets. This company moves millions. And yet, everyone earning under $60,000 waits 2 weeks to get paid. You've seen it. Payroll funds sitting untouched for 5, 6, sometimes 7 days in some holding account, earning interest for the company, while your coworkers pay $35 overdraft fees because they didn't time their bills perfectly. And that's the game, isn't it? They float. You drown. One night, you're mopping outside the HR wing and glance at a monitor left on. Payroll projection. Quarter 3. $4.2 million. Just parked in limbo. The same day Maria in customer service maxes out her last credit card to buy diapers. The same day you help a coworker calculate whether to skip a meal or skip a bill. And in that moment, it clicks. The system isn't broken. It's just functioning as intended. For someone else. You go home restless. Open your phone. Google, read, scroll. At first, it's simple. Why do paychecks take so long? Then, how do payroll APIs work? Then, what's embedded finance? You fall into a rabbit hole. Not clickbait. Not hustle bro YouTube. Real builders. Actual documentation. Fintech newsletters. You read about Gusto, Even, Mercury, Ramp. You learn about Plaid's API layers. Stripe Treasury. Earned wage access. And you begin to realize, the future of money isn't about making more, it's about how it moves. And you don't need a title to play. You just need to watch and act. So you test quietly. You open a fintech banking app. No fees, no delays. You route your paycheck through it. Then attach a debit card with automated cashback. You open a subwallet and call it Rent Buffer. Every purchase, you round up. You automate it through IFT. 12 cents here, 37 cents there. Then you find a card offering $25 referral bonuses. You refer 3 coworkers. You make $75 in a week. You're not gaming the system. You're playing by the rules, the ones no one else bothered to read. You don't announce it. You don't brag. You just keep building. You call it the stack in your notes. A quiet engine. Your version of a safety net. And within weeks, You're pulling in more from passive referrals and cashback than the annual raise your manager claimed wasn't approved this cycle. You're still wearing the same hoodie, still clocking in at 10:02 p.m. and out at 6:01 a.m., still getting paid $18 an hour. But everything has changed, because now you're not waiting for money to happen to you. You're directing it. Every hallway looks different now. The CFO's office is a case study. The finance team's trash can is a white paper. The break room is a behavioral economics lab. People talk about budgeting like it's the answer. But budgeting is just a band-aid on timing failure. You don't budget anymore. You route. You automate. You front-load. You loop cash back into savings, referrals into wallet credits, bill due dates into system reminders. You haven't escaped the system. You've embedded yourself within it. That's the difference. You didn't leave to get rich. You stayed and built leverage. Quietly. And now, every time someone complains about payday being too far, or asks if you've heard of this app called Dave, you smile. Because you've already moved past that layer. You're 3 steps ahead. You didn't just learn how the money moves, you learned how to move with it. They thought you were just sweeping. You were studying. No one notices. Yeah. But they will. There's a blueprint forming in the back of your mind. You're mapping out how to help Maria. How to show James in maintenance how to stack 3 rewards cards for essentials. How to build a micro-financial framework for the working class without needing a permission slip from a bank. You know what's coming. The question is, will they see it before it's too late? Because while they've been chasing profits, you've been building margin. Not just in dollars. In time. In options. In breathing room. And that's the real wealth no one talks about. You're not done yet. You're just getting started. The blueprint in your head is no longer just a thought. It's starting to take shape. Quietly. Silently. Efficiently. You don't talk about it, and no one asks. That's the privilege of being invisible. But invisibility also grants you access. Access to conversations you were never meant to hear, to problems you were never supposed to understand, to vulnerabilities the system assumes you're too simple to exploit. That assumption is their weakness. You've already proven that to yourself. Now you're about to see how deep it really goes. It's just past midnight on a Wednesday. You're vacuuming near the executive wing, moving slower than usual, not out of laziness, but to buy time. The doors are thin here. Conversations leak. And tonight, they're leaking gold. 2 voices echo from the CFO's office. One you recognize, Dan, the finance director who never meets your eyes. The other is someone higher, VP level, probably operations. You shouldn't be able to hear this. But you can. And what you hear confirms every suspicion you've had for months. They're already late on payroll in Phoenix, the VP mutters. If this funding round doesn't close, we're cooked. They'll get paid, Dan says, but there's a crack in his voice. We can float 2 weeks if we delay vendor payouts and stall the bonus disbursements. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul. Welcome to embedded finance, Dan chuckles darkly. That phrase hits your spine like a jolt. Not because it's new. Because it's the first time you've heard someone say it out loud. Someone on the inside. You've read blog posts and API documentation. You've seen embedded finance used as a buzzword to describe integrations between fintech apps and platforms. Automated lending, instant insurance quotes, buy now pay later buttons. But this is embedded finance in its rawest, most unfiltered form. An entire company operating like a shell game, moving money between silos just fast enough to avoid collapse. They call it smart liquidity. You call it gambling with people's rent. You keep moving, not because your shift demands it, but because staying too long might make them realize someone's listening. But your mind isn't on the vacuum anymore. It's on that phrase, embedded finance. It doesn't just apply to startups. It applies to everything. The way money sits, the way it flows, the way it delays, and who benefits from that delay. Dan and the VP aren't evil. They're just following the rules. Or rather, they're counting on the fact that no one else knows what the rules really are. But you do. That night, you go home and don't sleep. Again. You draw diagrams, cash flow maps, wage timing overlays. You sketch out how long money stays in company accounts versus how long it sits in employee wallets. You model interest earned per delay. It's not theoretical. It's theft, legal, structured, and beautifully hidden. You begin to understand that the system isn't built to oppress by force. It oppresses by design. The slowness isn't accidental. It's monetized. The next morning, you decide to push further. You know the cleaning schedule well enough to plan. You reroute your path so you're regularly passing the offices of legal, finance, and IT. Not every night. Just enough to catch fragments of conversations. The pieces come together like a mosaic of dysfunction. You overhear someone in legal arguing about payroll compliance across state lines. Something about the California team being classified as contractors when they should be W-2. Another night, someone in IT jokes that payroll automation is held together by duct tape and Google Sheets. Someone else mentions reverse sweep logic being broken, whatever that means. You don't understand all the terms. But you write them down. Google them. Cross-reference with API documentation. What emerges is clearer than you expected. The company is using embedded financial tools, but not to help employees. Not to create access. They're using them to stretch liquidity, turning human needs into floating leverage. Every 2 weeks, thousands of employees wait for money they already earned, so that the company can keep interest-bearing funds in motion. The employees think it's normal. You used to think so too. Not anymore. That weekend, you go back to your stack. You rebuild it from scratch with a new goal, not just to maximize your own rewards, but to measure your delta. How much value you're extracting from money that would otherwise sit idle. You track every dollar, every referral bonus, every cashback route. You build visual dashboards in Notion, color-coded by function. Rent, food, transportation, emergency. Each has its own embedded logic. Rules you designed. Rules that favor you. You start timing everything. You set up alerts to show how long it takes your paycheck to land versus how long it takes you to spend it. You identify float windows. Periods where cash is available but unused. Then you fill them with systems that reward you for short-term liquidity. Micro-interest sweep accounts. High-yield wallets. Even a prepaid business card that rewards daily use with scalable points. You no longer think like an employee. You think like a node in a network. Your money moves faster than the company's. More efficiently. More intentionally. And you wonder how many others could do this if they just knew where to look. The next breakthrough comes by accident. A young guy from IT, Ben, maybe 25, sees your card one night when you buy a Red Bull from the vending machine. "What's that?" he asks. You shrug. "Just a debit card. Cashback." "How much?" 2%. "Sometimes more." He nods. "Better than mine." You hesitate for a second, then pull up the app. Show him the interface, the referral link, the breakdown. His eyes widen. That's clean. That night, he signs up. 2 days later, he tells 2 of his friends in DevOps. By the end of the week, you've made $150 in referral rewards without saying more than 3 sentences. You realize something simple but dangerous. Once people see what's possible, they don't go back. You're not pitching. You're not promoting. You're just showing them a system that works better. Word spreads, slowly, but enough that a few more coworkers start asking questions. One person in logistics. Another from accounting. You keep the answers short. Practical. Specific. I use this one for groceries. This one rounds up every transaction into savings. This one lets me split my check between rent and an emergency buffer. No fluff. No jargon. Just tools that solve real timing problems. You're no longer just building a system. You're testing distribution. At some point, you know this will attract attention. Maybe good. Maybe bad. But for now, you're under the radar. And that's where leverage grows best, in the quiet. Because while they worry about fundraising rounds, you're building something with no valuation, no burn rate, no board approval required. Just results. Just movement. just truth. You remember the VP's voice. "We're robbing Peter to pay Paul." They were. But now, you've learned to be Peter and Paul at the same time. And every week, more people notice the shift. Not in your title, not in your uniform, but in your posture. Your confidence. The way you move like someone who doesn't depend on payday anymore. They can't name it. But you can. It's embedded finance. And it belongs to you now. You weren't supposed to understand how it all worked. That's what made it so perfect. The system assumes you'll never look too closely. Never ask why payroll hits late, why cashback offers vary, why money earned today doesn't arrive until next Friday. They build walls made of jargon and dashboards and compliance workflows and hope you'll stay distracted long enough to just keep swiping your card, paying your fees, and nodding politely when they say, "That's just how it works." But you looked. You listened. And you didn't just hear the words. They triggered something. A deeper question. Not just why, but what if? What if money didn't have to wait? What if your paycheck wasn't a destination, but a node, one of many in a system you could design? What if the delay that costs everyone else their freedom could become your advantage? That question became the seed. And from it, you began to build. Not an app. Not a startup. A stack. The first layer was basic. You started with a fintech checking account, one that offered no-fee direct deposit, instant transfers, and automated cash categorization. You chose it because it was simple, fast, and didn't talk down to you. You routed your paycheck there instead of your legacy bank. The difference was immediate. No more two-day lag. No more funds pending. It hit when it hit. You felt the shift instantly. Not just in your bank balance, but in your sense of control. The second layer added optimization. You paired that account with a debit card that offered tiered cashback, 2% at grocery stores, 3% at gas stations, rotating 5% categories every quarter. You read every term, every fine print clause. You understood that most people leave money on the table because they never bother to dig one level deeper. You dug. Then you created a system. You started tagging your purchases. You built categories in Notion and linked them manually. You created workflows that mirrored how your money moved. You labeled every transaction with not just where the money went, but what purpose it served. Survival. Growth. Optional. Anchor. The third layer came when you found your first referral loop. A prepaid debit product with a partner program. $25 per sign-up, $50 after 5 active users. You didn't promote it. You just used it. Shared it. When people asked, you pointed. No pitch. Just function. And it worked. Within 3 months, you had 10 people using your link. That's $250. Money that used to sit idle now creating cash flow. Not because you were an influencer. Because you were solving real timing problems for real people. You started layering more. An app that paid you daily cashback, deposited instantly into a high-yield wallet. A card that allowed you to split every purchase into microtransactions that rounded up into savings. A checking account that let you set percentage-based auto-transfers to custom folders. 10% to rent buffer, 5% to emergency, 3% to learning. You built automation where others saw chaos. You weren't just tracking dollars. You were tracking behavior. And behavior reveals truth. You realized most people didn't have a spending problem. They had a sequencing problem. Bills came due before money landed. Emergencies happened before savings accumulated. And that gap, that sliver of mistiming, is where debt lived. It's where banks built empires and workers got buried. You designed your stack to destroy that gap. Each piece fed the next. Cashback created float. Float funded micro-savings. Micro-savings became capital. Capital created calm. And calm, when paired with control, became something rare in your world, space to think. You were still working the same job. Still punching in, still carrying the mop, still invisible to most. But inside your phone was a flowchart of financial precision that would make most junior analysts flinch. You'd become a one-person embedded finance engine. Not because you wanted to optimize. Because you wanted to escape the cycle no one else even questioned. And yet, you weren't done. The fourth layer came from experimentation. You started trying new tools, not for features, but for friction. You wanted to know how easy it was to break them, where they failed, what they didn't say in their marketing. You built shadow accounts, test wallets. You routed small streams through multiple providers to measure delays. You tracked settlement times across 3 debit platforms. You emailed support teams pretending to be 5 different personas just to test their assumptions. You learned that most of these fintech products weren't built for people like you. They were built for early adopters. Tech Brothers product managers. Not janitors. Not warehouse workers. Not delivery drivers. And yet, you used them better than they did. Because you weren't using them to be clever. You were using them to survive. And survival creates clarity. You dropped the tools that failed your benchmarks. Delays longer than 24 hours? Gone. Rewards capped too low. Eliminated. Apps with inconsistent APIs or opaque referral terms? Cut. You weren't building a stack anymore. You were curating an ecosystem. And that ecosystem had rules. 1. Everything must move faster than the employer's payroll. 2. Nothing should require a credit check. 3. Every layer must feed another. 4. The moment it adds friction, it's out. You called it the quiet system. And in the back of your notebook, hidden behind old grocery receipts and scribbled notes from midnight mop sessions, you began sketching a map. Not just for you. For anyone. Because once you saw the pattern, you couldn't unsee it. Every 2-week pay cycle was a delay tactic. Every overdraft protection was a monetized failure. Every cashback reward was proof that value could be shared, but usually wasn't. Your system wasn't magic. It was just awake. You started testing it with others. One coworker at a time. Maria got a rent buffer wallet and saved $80 in her first month. James rerouted his paycheck and eliminated overdraft fees for the first time in 2 years. A new guy in logistics set up a micro-savings loop and hit $300 by accident. You weren't teaching them fintech. You were showing them how to breathe. And in doing so, something shifted in you. You began thinking beyond the janitor closet, beyond your shift, beyond your paycheck. You started thinking like a builder. You wondered, what if this wasn't just for people at this company? What if this stack could scale? Not as a product, as a mindset, a template, a seed. You knew the apps weren't perfect. Some would shut down. Some would get acquired. But the idea, the logic behind the stack, that was permanent. Because the truth wasn't in the tools. It was in the timing. And you'd mastered it. You've been experimenting long enough. Testing ideas in the dark. Building workflows that most people would never notice, let alone understand. But something shifts the day you decide to stop treating this like a side project. This isn't about clever hacks or finding the latest fintech app with fancy UI. This is about survival, about leverage, about control. And if there's one thing you've learned in the past few months, it's this. If you want control, you need to build a system. A real one. Not a list of tricks, but a flow that works without thinking. So you get to work. You call it the first stack. Not because it's perfect. Not because it's profitable. But because it's the first time you make every financial decision with intent. You begin by rewriting your money map from scratch. You grab a piece of cardboard from the janitor closet, flip it over, and start drawing. You list your income sources, bi-weekly paycheck from facilities, occasional referral bonuses from the debit card company, a few bucks from reselling used tools on OfferUp. It's not much, but it's real. You draw arrows from income to expenses, rent, groceries, gas, insurance, subscriptions. You highlight pain points. Rent always hits before your paycheck. Groceries eat into your buffer. The Netflix charge always surprises you. You stare at that map for an hour, and then you flip the logic. Instead of money flowing reactively, you imagine it flowing proactively. You stop asking, where did it go? And start asking, where should it go next? The first layer is income capture. You reroute your paycheck to a fintech platform, one that offers same-day direct deposit. You test it once, and the difference is immediate. Instead of hitting Friday afternoon, your money arrives Wednesday morning. 48 hours of breathing room. 2 days where you're not guessing how much is in your account before you swipe. The second layer is flow control. You enable smart routing. 70% goes to checking, 20% to a high-yield sub-wallet labeled Rent, 10% to another sub-wallet called Flex. No manual transfers. No guesswork. Every dollar knows where to land. The third layer is feedback. You install a budgeting app, not one that lectures you, but one that reflects your behavior. You set rules. If spending on food exceeds $200 per month, trigger a yellow alert. If cash in Flex drops below $100, freeze subscriptions. You create logic gates. You aren't just spending, you're programming. You want to see what happens when money follows instructions better than people do. The fourth layer is cashback. You swap your debit card for one that offers 3% back on groceries, 1% on everything else. You make a rule. Use only this card for food. You track it. The first month, you get $9.84 back. Not life-changing, but that's 2 hours of electricity, or a week of bus fare. You don't dismiss it. You redirect it. It lands in a new wallet labeled Heat. In December, that wallet becomes a lifeline. The fifth layer is savings automation. You activate roundups on every transaction. Every $3.61 becomes $4, and the 39 cents moves silently into a stash called Float. You forget about Float, until one day you check it and find $87 sitting there. You smile, not because you saved it, because you didn't have to remember to save it. That's power. The sixth layer is risk smoothing. You set up an emergency wallet with a 2-day payout window, slower but higher yield. You fund it with a portion of your referral bonuses. It's your last resort account. You hope never to touch it, but knowing it's there changes how you walk into every shift. There's a calm you didn't have before. You run this system for 1 month, then 2, then 3. You log everything in Notion. You build charts. You analyze your own data like a product manager. You discover that your average transaction size at the gas station is $37.46, that you spend 18% more on groceries the week before payday, that the Flex wallet reduces your impulse purchases by 43% when it has more than $75 in it. These aren't abstract metrics. They're behavioral patterns. And patterns are leverage. You begin fine-tuning. You move Netflix and Spotify to the Flex wallet. If the wallet runs dry, the service pauses. You create a cause and effect loop. Want music? Keep your Flex buffer up. Want movies? Don't drain yourself on junk. You're not punishing behavior. You're shaping it. You find a fintech app that lets you link bills to weather. You test it. If the temperature drops below 40 degrees in your zip code, the app moves $20 from float into heat. It sounds ridiculous, until that first cold snap hits and you don't have to choose between groceries and gas. You realize automation isn't about complexity. It's about care. You share none of this publicly. No blog post. No tweet thread. Just quiet refinement. You're building like someone no one expects. That's your edge. One night, you finish a shift early and sit in your car, phone in hand, dashboard glowing. You scroll through your wallets. Rent. Funded. Heat. Active. Float. Growing. Flex. Stable. You have $2,218 across 5 buckets. A year ago, you had less than $50, and none of it was intentional. Now, every dollar has a job, and every job reinforces the next. You didn't build wealth. Not yet. You built motion. And motion beats inertia every time. You begin seeing systems everywhere. The coffee machine is a delay node, money burned for caffeine under stress. The vending machine is a liquidity trap, fast, tempting, overpriced. You start creating invisible signs in your head. Alert, low ROI. Caution, unstructured spending. Every step through the building is a chance to observe. Not just your habits, everyone's. You begin noticing how others live. The guy in receiving who pays overdraft fees every other week. The admin assistant who Venmos her boyfriend for half the rent. The part-time warehouse worker juggling 3 bank accounts to dodge fees. They're not irresponsible. They're unarmed. So you test your stack on someone else. Maria, from customer service. 2 kids. Works 6 days. Always tired. You ask her one question: what if your rent wallet filled itself before rent was due? She laughs. Thinks you're joking. But you show her. Just one rule. 30% of every deposit to a labeled bucket. After 4 weeks, she has $622. Enough to pay rent 2 days early. For the first time in 6 months. She cries. Quietly. Then she tells you she didn't think that was possible without a raise. That's when you know you're onto something bigger than your own life. You test it with James from janitorial. Same result. Smaller scale. Same effect. Predictability creates dignity. Control creates peace. These aren't financial products. They're emotional stabilizers. You stop calling it the stack. You start calling it the frame. Because it frames behavior. And once something has a frame, it becomes visible. Your life becomes a feedback loop. You earn, route, measure, refine. Not for the sake of growth, but clarity. Every decision is visible. Every trade-off is mapped. There are no mysteries left. Only options. And options are the opposite of poverty. Poverty is not just lack of money. It's lack of control. Lack of optionality. Lack of forward logic. But you have logic now. You built it. From scratch. From a job no one admires. From moments no one valued. From scraps. And it works. You still wear the same hoodie. Still clean the same hallways. But you don't live in reaction anymore. You live inside a system you designed. And that's the first stack. The one that changed everything. It doesn't happen all at once. That's the thing no one tells you. When people talk about change, especially financial change, they always make it sound cinematic. One big moment. One check clears. One opportunity clicks. But that's not how it happens when you're on the ground. For you, it starts quieter. Slower. It starts with margin. Not profit margin, life margin. The difference between "I hope I make it" and "I know I will." The first time you feel it is on a Thursday afternoon. You're off early. The sun's still out. You stop by the gas station on the way home, out of habit. Normally, you'd pump $20, maybe $25, just enough to make it to next week. But today, for reasons you don't fully understand, you tap the card, let it fill. $42.61. The tank clicks full, and you don't flinch. No tightness in your chest. No mental math. Just fuel. You get in the car and sit for a minute, keys in your lap. You didn't even look at your balance before pumping. That's new. You're not rich. You're not even close. But you're not afraid. That's what margin feels like. At home, you open your phone. Heat wallet. Funded. Rent wallet. Funded. Flex wallet. Stable. Float. Growing. You realize you haven't overdraft in 70 days. That's a record. Not because you worked more hours. Because your system worked while you slept. Your fridge looks different, too. Not full, but balanced. 2 days' worth of prepared meals. Leftovers in labeled containers. One small shelf for indulgence, dark chocolate, a 6-pack of LaCroix, a frozen pizza. It doesn't scream wealth. It whispers stability. And your posture's different. People notice before you do. You walk straighter. Slower. Less rushed. One of the new security guys asks if you got promoted. You laugh it off. But the question stays with you. Because something did shift. It starts showing up in your choices. You say no to things you would have said yes to before. Cheap overtime, exhausting double shifts, fast food after a 12-hour day. Not because you're lazy. Because you can now afford to protect your energy. You start reading again. Just 10 minutes a night. Blogs. Essays. A book on behavioral design you found at Goodwill for $1.75. You take notes. You reflect. You begin thinking long-term, not just long enough to survive the week. Then comes the test. Your phone screen cracks. Not a hairline, obliterated. Normally, that would derail everything. You juggle bills, skip meals, maybe borrow. But this time, you check flex. $189. Float. $98. You drive to a repair shop, pay $179, and walk out with your head high. No debt. No delay. No begging. You fixed a problem with funds you assigned weeks ago. That's leverage. A few days later, it happens again. Your cousin calls. Emergency dental work. Needs $100. Normally, you'd apologize. Say you can't. Feel the weight of guilt you didn't create. But this time, you say yes. Quietly. Not to show off. Not because you owe him. Because you can. Because you built a buffer no one else sees. He texts you a thank you emoji. You smile, but it's not pride you feel, it's responsibility. You helped not from overflow, but from intention. That's a different kind of wealth. Then one evening, something strange happens. Your manager pulls you aside. Not to scold. To ask, "Hey, you still using that weird debit card thing?" You nod. He frowns. "My checking account froze a payment again. You think that app you use could help?" You pause. Measure your words. "Maybe. Depends what you want it to do." He chuckles nervously. "Honestly, I just want to stop getting wrecked by overdrafts." You send him a link. He doesn't say thanks. But the next week, you overhear him telling someone about this new setup I'm trying. You say nothing. But you log it. Another signal. You start tracking signals now. Ben from IT switches to your stack. Then 2 people from dispatch. Then Maria refers her sister. It's not viral. But it's real. You keep it quiet. No branding. No pitch. Just quiet effectiveness. Word of mouth in break rooms and late-night text threads. Then your numbers change. Not wildly, but steadily. Referral bonuses trickle in. Cashback payouts land on time. The Heat wallet overflows, so you reroute it into Float. You rename Flex to Breathing Room. It feels more accurate. Then one night, you check your total across all wallets. $2,912.21. That number holds you still. It's not the most you've ever had, but it's the most you've ever managed on purpose. Every dollar visible. Every dollar assigned. Every dollar tracked. No windfall. No gift. Just friction turned into flow. That night, you sleep without white noise for the first time in months. You dream in clarity. The next week, the company's payment system glitches. Half the staff doesn't get paid on time. People panic. HR gets flooded. But you wait. Not calmly, but solidly. Because your rent's already covered. Your food's already funded. Your bills already accounted for. You don't rely on Friday anymore. You've outgrown the calendar. Maria texts you, "You saved me." Seriously. You reread that message 6 times. The week after, something else shifts. You're asked to speak. Not on stage. Not in a meeting. Just at lunch, in the warehouse, with 5 co-workers huddled around a folding table. Show us how you set it up. You walk them through the basics. You draw it on a napkin. Income, rent, float, breathing room, heat. They ask questions. You answer simply. You don't use jargon. You tell stories. I cracked my phone, didn't flinch. That's what breathing room is for. Heads nod. Someone says, "I wish school taught us this." You reply, "They were never going to." It lands. After that, you build a page. Just a link. A place to organize the tools you use. You label them by function. You add one line, "This is what helped me stop panicking." You share it only when asked. But people ask more now. You realize you've become a quiet center of gravity. Not a leader. Not a guru. Just someone who walked out of panic and remembered the way. Then comes the day you realize something terrifying. You don't want to leave this job. You always thought you would. That freedom meant escape. But now, you don't feel stuck. You feel embedded. You walk the same halls, clean the same floors, but you walk with a secret, a system, a structure that makes you untouchable in ways that have nothing to do with title or salary. You get paid to clean floors, but your system runs 24/7. It earns when you rest. It protects when you're distracted. It grows while you work. That's the payoff, not the money. The shift. From panic to posture. From fear to frame. From reaction to rhythm. You don't broadcast it. You live it. And those who pay attention, those who really look, start to wonder. How come he never looks rushed? Why is he the only one not complaining on payday? Why does he always say no without guilt? You never answer with a speech. You just tap your phone, check your flow, and keep walking. You've built something, and it works. That's wealth. Even if no one sees it yet. You knew this day would come. You just didn't expect it to feel like this. Not urgent. Not dramatic. Not someone kicking down your door, demanding to know what you're hiding. It comes quieter. Like everything else about the life you've been building. It starts with a glance. Then a question. Then something else. Something harder to describe. It feels like attention. You're used to being invisible. That's been your superpower. The way you moved between departments unnoticed, the way you collected observations like dust, quiet, constant, impossible to track. But something's different now. People are watching you. Not in a threatening way. In a curious one. They notice how you walk slower, how you're never out of breath, how your clothes look less wrinkled, how you always have a full lunch, never complain about bills, and never jump when someone mentions payday. It starts with a guy named Eric. Maintenance crew. Mid-40s. Drives a 97 Civic with a driver door that won't lock. He catches you on break and says, "You always seem good." Like, I don't know, like you're not rushing anymore. You pause. Then nod. I stopped waiting for money to fix my schedule. Built something that works regardless. He squints. Built what? You hesitate. Then show him. Just one layer. The cashback setup. You pull out your phone, show the heat wallet, the automation rule. $34.18 from the last 2 weeks, routed into a gas fund. He stares at it like you've just shown him a hidden page of his own life. He doesn't say much. Just, huh. That's wild. A week later, he's using your link. Then it spreads. A few guys from logistics whisper about that system you have. Maria tells you her cousin wants to learn how to do the envelopes on your phone. You notice someone in HR walking past you twice in the same day, glancing down like they want to say something but can't quite find the opening. You get used to it. Then, one day, it goes further. You're mopping near the executive conference room, late, quiet, no one around, and the door opens. It's Diane, your floor manager. Clipboard in hand, AirPods in, latte balanced dangerously close to spilling. She stops when she sees you. "Hey, you got a sec?" You nod. She gestures you into the hallway. It's sterile, bright, too clean for a real conversation. But that's where it happens. "I've heard people talking," she says. "About you. About how you've got something set up. Like a financial thing." You say nothing. She continues. "They say you don't stress about bills. That you've got some app stack or workflow or whatever." Still nothing. Then she does something you didn't expect. She lowers her voice. "I need help." That sentence, those 3 words, shift the floor beneath you. She's not broke. She's not desperate. She's not crying on the sidewalk. She's salaried. Drives a hybrid. Wears an Apple Watch. But she's tired. And she's late on her rent for the 2nd time this quarter. And her credit cards are starting to snowball. "I'm not asking for money," she adds quickly. "I just want to know how you stay so calm." You nod once. Then say, "It's not about calm. It's about architecture." She looks confused. You explain. You describe the frame, not the full tech. Not every app and integration. Just the bones. How you route your income into purpose-driven buckets, how you assign intent to every dollar, how you've structured your money like a building with smart plumbing. How it flows without you needing to hold every pipe in place. Her eyes soften. That sounds like something I need. Badly. You offer to map it out. She agrees. 3 days later, you sit across from her in a quiet corner of the break room. She brings a notebook. You bring nothing but your phone and your memory. You draw the stack. Rent bucket. Heat wallet. Breathing room. Float. Emergency. She takes notes. Fast. Like she's afraid it'll disappear. When you finish, she looks at you differently. Not like a janitor. Not like a tech wizard. Like someone who's been where she is and walked out the other side. I can't believe no one's talking about this, she whispers. They are, you reply. Just not where you're listening. After that, things accelerate. Not fast, but steady. Word spreads further. You start getting pings. Notes left in your locker. Slack messages from coworkers you didn't even know had your name. One says, "Can you help me fix my paycheck flow?" Another, "Got $400 saved for the first time ever. Thanks." And another, "My mom's on your system now. It's changing everything." You don't start a business. You don't charge. You don't scale. You just document. You clean up your Notion template, standardize your language, create short guides for each wallet. 1 page, 1 outcome. No theory, just execution. The response is quiet, but consistent. You hear someone call it janitor finance. You laugh, then embrace it. Because who better to build a system no one sees than someone who's made invisibility their skill set? Then something else happens. Corporate sends an email. It's about a financial wellness initiative. Lunch and learns. Budgeting seminars. A PDF with 5 steps to manage stress. You glance through it. It's generic. Patronizing. Step 1. Track your spending. Step 2. Cancel unused subscriptions. You close the file. The next day, Diane pulls you aside again. They're flying in someone from headquarters, she says, to talk about employee finance support. You should hear what they say. You nod. Then ask, do they know how people here actually live? She shrugs. Probably not. You don't attend the session, but you hear the feedback. They talked about IRAs like we all have extra money. Felt like they were pitching a credit union. Didn't answer any real questions. The next week, 5 more people ask for your system. You start seeing the divide. Not between rich and poor. Not even between departments. Between those who wait to be told what to do, and those who quietly figure it out. You've crossed over. And now, others want to follow. That's the ask. It's not about influence. It's not about content. It's not even about money. It's about memory. People remember panic. Financial stress brands you in ways no one else sees. They don't want to panic anymore. They want a new memory. A calmer one. And somehow, they've decided you're the one who can help them build it. You didn't plan this. But now it's real. And something inside you is beginning to shift again. Maybe it's time to think bigger. You didn't plan on becoming a framework. You didn't sit down with a whiteboard, dreaming up a financial system. You were just trying to breathe. But now you can. And now others want to know how. It started small. A few co-workers asking questions. Then came Diane. Then the warehouse guys. Then HR, kind of. And then it became too real to ignore. So one night, after your shift ends, you stay in the break room. No distractions. No background noise. Just you, your phone, and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights. You take out a receipt from lunch and start sketching what you know. What you lived. What actually worked. It doesn't look like much. Just a few bullet points. But those bullet points carried you from chaos to clarity. You write, reroute income. Divide by intent. Automate the flow. Time the delay. Reduce friction. Build feedback. Show, don't tell. You stare at those lines and feel something shift. This is more than memory. It's architecture. You didn't invent these ideas. You discovered them by necessity. And now it's time to make them usable. So you take them digital. You open Notion and build out each one. No fluff. No quotes. No branding. Just function. For reroute income, you break down where to send your paycheck so it doesn't land in a legacy bank that holds it hostage. You compare deposit speeds across fintech platforms. You include screenshots. Real accounts. No marketing. For divide by intent, you build a wallet map. 70% core, 20% flex, 10% future. You explain what each does and how to automate the transfers using built-in rules. You add logic trees. If core exceeds rent, move to float. If flex dips below $50, pause subscriptions. For automate the flow, you include links to apps that support conditional routing. You test them with your own money. You chart the failures. You highlight what works. You treat it like plumbing. If it leaks, it doesn't belong. For time the delay, you break down the lag window between funds received and bills posted. You explain how to extract value from those 48 hours. Micro-interest accounts, cashback advance cards, sweep rules. For reduce friction, you strip every manual step. You teach them how to run a system they don't have to think about. Spend without tracking. No. Tag spending by emoji and color code. Want to save? Use rules, not reminders. You even list the top 3 workflows that take less than 90 seconds to set up. For build feedback, you create what you call internal nudges. If rent wallet is above 90% by the 10th, trigger a green alert. If float has $0 for 3 straight days, push a yellow banner, you're flying too close. If flex crosses $300, send a breathe message. You make money feel alive. And finally, show, don't tell. You don't use slides. You don't use words like optimize or financial freedom. You use examples. Maria's rent paid early. James fixed his truck without borrowing. Diane stopped overdrafting. These stories stick. They travel without effort. When you're done building it, you look at what you've made. It's not a course. It's not a product. It's not a pitch deck. It's a system that works for people who don't have time to ask questions. You test it. Quietly. You give access to 5 people. One condition: live it, don't skim it. They follow through. Slowly. But it moves. You get messages like, dude, I just paid rent and had money left over, and I didn't freak out when my hours got cut this week, and I never thought I'd be the kind of person who checks accounts just to smile. You don't respond with excitement. You just log it. The system works. Then Jack, the building director, finds you outside the supply closet. You think he's going to ask about mop storage. Instead, he says, I heard you've got something helping people around here. You nod. He asks, can you package it? Quietly. Nothing official. Just something the other teams can try. You say yes. You rename the file, the mop stack. Internal version. Version 0.1. You send it. A week later, he passes it to HR. HR pretends it's theirs. You don't mind. The people who matter know where it came from. After that, requests trickle in. Not from leaders. From co-workers. How do I start? Can you show me the rent rule? What app do you use for float? You don't send links. You send a note that says, start with what hurts. Solve that first. Then follow the map. You realize this is teaching. Not in the classroom sense. Not in the coaching sense. In the shared trench sense. You're not pulling people up. You're walking them out. One pattern at a time. You keep it small. On purpose. You don't want attention. You want replication. Your system isn't built for scale. It's built for survival. Then one Friday, the payroll system glitches again. Same as last time. Missed deposits. Confusion. Stress. You walk through the warehouse and watch the panic spread. But not everywhere. Maria is calm. Devon is chill. Even Ben from IT shrugs. You know why? They're running the stack. You feel something settle in your chest. For once, you're not the only one holding the map. Then you get the question you didn't expect. A message from an office admin you've never met. Heard you've got a framework. Any way we can bring it to our shift team? You hesitate. Then reply, only if someone from the team owns it. They say, done. You pass them the clean version. No edits. No customization. It spreads. Again. You stop tracking numbers. It's not about reach. It's about rhythm. You still clean floors. Still restock soap. Still eat lunch alone sometimes. But now there's a system moving behind you. Invisible. Quiet. Functional. You built it to save yourself. Now it's saving time, energy, and breath for others. You're not a manager. You're not a guru. But you've become something more dangerous. A person with results. And in this world, results cut through noise. They echo. They whisper. And people follow whispers longer than they follow speeches. You walk out of work that night with your headphones in, your phone buzzing with one last message. This changed how I see money. I'm showing my son tomorrow. You smile. The system works. And no one saw it coming. Because it never needed to be seen. It just needed to move. Like water under tile. Like wires in walls. Like systems behind the mop. It doesn't look like $200,000. That's the first thing that surprises you. No Porsche in the driveway. No upgrade to an apartment with marble countertops. No sudden taste for suits. You still wear the same hoodie. Still use the same keycard. Still clock in and out with a mop in your hand. But the numbers don't lie. Last year, you made $67,000 from your day job. The rest, $133,000, came from everything else. A dozen embedded referral streams. Stacked automations. Cashback loops. Silent splits. A digital framework that now lives inside the wallets of more than 3,000 people across 17 states. You don't even know most of their names. But every time someone follows the system and finds breathing room, every time a float wallet grows, or a breathing room bucket hits $500, your infrastructure pays you back. Not through tips. Through movement. Through scale without noise. You never called it monetization. You called it motion. But motion, sustained long enough, becomes income. And income, detached from hours, becomes power. You're not flashy. You're not famous. You're efficient. It started with a decision to document everything that worked. Every delay that became a dividend. Every error that became a trigger. Every calendar rule that stopped you from overdrafting. The frameworks stacked. The results compounded. Then came the referrals. Then the partner offers. You turned most down. Only said yes when the product aligned with the system. You weren't trying to be a creator. You were trying to be useful. That mindset paid more than marketing ever could. Now you're running a stack that pays weekly, regardless of your shift. You still clean floors, but you don't do it for money anymore. You do it for rhythm. For clarity. For alignment. Some people notice. Most don't. You like it that way. But there's no denying something has changed. It starts with how people treat you. The building director now asks for your opinion during budget meetings. Not on mops, on margins. The head of HR asks you to review their new employee financial onboarding tool before rollout. You rewrite the whole thing in under 30 minutes. One of the regional VPs refers to you as our financial systems guy during a Zoom call. You weren't even on the call, but someone forwarded you the clip. None of these moments feel like ego boosts. They feel like proof. Proof that structure beats performance. Proof that you don't need a title to build something worth following. Proof that a janitor who understands embedded finance can outmaneuver an MBA who doesn't. Your inbox starts to shift, too. People you've never met send messages like, I used to live check to check. Now I breathe differently. Thanks. I taught your system to my cousin. She just paid off her car early. I don't know who you are, but your thing made me $300 last month. Bought groceries for my mom. You don't save the screenshots. You save the stories. That's how you know the system works. Not when it scales. When it transfers. You start calling it the janitor effect. Not publicly. Just to yourself. It's the effect of building something in the shadows that changes how people walk in the light. It's what happens when a solution doesn't scream, it moves like air. It works whether you're watching or not. You start to feel a strange tension. For the first time, the outside world wants in. 2 fintech companies email asking to license the system. One offers a 5-figure deal to white label the stack and relaunch it as their own product. You don't even reply. A popular YouTuber DMs you asking for an interview. I heard you've built a financial ghost town that's paying people in silence. That's a story. You decline. A VC fund asks to talk about opportunities to scale infrastructure around underserved communities. You laugh. That's exactly what you've been doing, with 0 meetings. You say no to all of them. Not out of pride. Out of principle. Because you know what happens when systems get turned into platforms. They add onboarding friction. They add sales goals. They remove the parts that feel human, the pauses, the dignity, the freedom to leave. So you keep it small. You keep it quiet. You keep it human. Instead of growing the system outward, you deepen it inward. You add 2 new modules. One called Signal, a feedback loop that identifies life patterns, moments of panic, moments of calm, and surfaces insights based on those. You train it to notice when someone's rent wallet hits 100% 3 weeks early. It triggers a nudge. You're ahead. Where can you breathe more? Another one when flex drops for 4 weeks in a row, pressure is growing. Where's the leak? The other module is called Inherit. It lets people set up mirrored stacks for their kids or family. Same logic, different pace. You see people using it to help parents, siblings, even co-workers. They're not just fixing their own flow, they're teaching others to build their own. The system becomes less like a toolkit and more like a philosophy. Not how to be rich, but how to stop being trapped. And that, more than the money, is what begins to ripple out. At work, people walk differently now. Less panic in the break room. More patience on payday. One of the cafeteria workers stops you in the hallway. I heard you're the reason my nephew's not drowning anymore, she says. You nod. Then she adds, I don't know what you did. But thank you. You've heard versions of that a dozen times. It never stops hitting you the same way. Then comes the moment you never imagined. An email. From a national nonprofit that builds financial education programs for working-class Americans. They read your system. They want to distribute it to janitors, cafeteria workers, warehouse crews across the country. They offer a stipend. You decline. They offer attribution. You decline. They ask what you want. You reply, let it stay quiet. Don't brand it. Don't turn it into a campaign. Just give it to the ones who actually need it. They agree. And just like that, the janitor effect moves beyond your building. No announcement. No newsletter. Just action. That year, your system moves through 20,000 wallets. You don't track the money. You track the time it gave back. You still mop. Still scan badge. Still live in the same apartment. But now, you don't do it alone. You walk among people who've tasted something they didn't think they'd ever feel again. Margin. Not in their bank account, in their life. You get asked one last question, near the end of the year, by a coworker named Alina who just joined the team. You still do this job? She asks, almost confused. You smile. It's the best place to test systems no one sees. She nods, still puzzled. But you don't need to anymore, right? You pause. Then say, maybe not. But every day I mop a floor someone else rushes across, I'm reminded what the world looks like without margin. I never want to forget that. She nods slowly. Then says, thank you. For not forgetting. You walk out that night under the same streetlights you always do. But something feels different. You realize you've become the most dangerous kind of builder in America. Not the loud one. The invisible one who fixed the system from underneath. The janitor who earns $200,000 a year, not by chasing status, but by designing flow. And leaving behind a blueprint others can follow. You were taught how to work. You were taught how to follow rules. You were taught how to clock in, clock out, keep your head down, and be grateful. You were taught that success wears a suit. That wealth lives in zip codes you can't afford. That people like you are supposed to serve people like them. But no one ever taught you how the system actually works. Not really. Not the part behind the paycheck. Not the reason payday always lags. Not why banks profit off the timing of your rent. Not why your exhaustion funds someone else's passive income. They taught you hustle, but they never taught you leverage. Until you had to teach yourself. You learned it in silence, after midnight, in hallways nobody walked but you. You learned it by watching money sit idle in company accounts while coworkers begged for advances. You learned it by following how dollars moved, not how they were spoken about. That's the lesson they don't print in textbooks. Money doesn't just reward effort, it rewards architecture. And architecture is invisible to those too busy surviving to look up. You were lucky. Not because someone saved you, but because you stopped waiting. You built the thing no one ever showed you how to build. A personal system strong enough to outrun panic, consistent enough to generate freedom. Not freedom to quit. Freedom to stay without suffering. Freedom to say no. Freedom to help. Freedom to decide. And that system, it didn't come from theory. It came from tension. Tension between paycheck and bill. Between effort and outcome. Between knowing you're not dumb, but still feeling stuck. Between doing everything right, and still being broke on a Friday night. That tension taught you what the world wouldn't. That dignity is not given, it's built. That wealth isn't always loud. That power moves silently, just like pain. The stack gave you margin. Margin gave you breath. Breath gave you clarity. Clarity gave you choice. And with choice came the deepest insight of all. You never needed more money. You needed a better relationship with time, flow, and structure. You learned that life doesn't reward intention. It rewards systems that work without you. So you built one. And in doing so, you taught others what no school, job, or boss ever taught you. That wealth isn't about accumulation. It's about architecture. That the opposite of poverty isn't riches. It's control. That the most valuable financial product is a life you don't need to escape from. And now, years later, that's what you carry. Not just income, not just impact, but a map, passed on not in speeches, but in systems. Quiet ones, personal ones, functional ones. That's the lesson you never got taught. And now it's the one you quietly pass on. Not through status, not through fame, but through flow. Through function. Through the life you now live without asking anyone for permission. Because the greatest wealth isn't being seen. It's not needing to be.